Joining us now for the Biden campaign's first live interview since the announcement of the conviction is National Co-Chair for President Biden's reelection campaign, Mitch Landrieu. Mitch, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it. Well, let's just start right there.
Good morning.
What is the reaction? What is your reaction to what we heard yesterday, a historic moment, the first conviction ever of a former president of the United States?
Well, I think that it's a very sober moment for the country and a very sad moment for the country, for all of the people in America to have a president or an ex-president become a convicted felon. That's nothing for anybody to have a lot of joy about. But yesterday, you saw democracy work. One of the fundamental tenets of democracy is that everybody in the United States is subject to the rule of law, that you come before a judge and a jury of your peers, facts and evidence are held, and then a verdict is rendered. That is what a nation that relies on laws not of men is supposed to do. And as a consequence of that trial, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. But that does not change the fact that the only thing that can stop him from getting to the White House is the American people. They will be the final jury as it relates to who is the president of the United States. And the choice is really, really clear. You can have a guy that's a convicted felon that has been found liable of defamation, sexual abuse, and business fraud, and now a convicted felon who thinks about himself. And, of course, every word that comes out of his mouth thinks about revenge against people who dare cross him. Or you can have Joe Biden, who wakes up every day thinking about the American people, delivering, making sure that our democracies are protected, our freedoms are protected, and that he makes life better for all Americans. That's the choice before the American people. And nothing that happened yesterday is going to change that fact that we have an election about who America is going to be for years to come in a couple of months.
So you just framed the national significance of yesterday and the choice ahead. But tell us, how will the Biden campaign use this verdict? How will you incorporate it into your messaging, and what will the president himself say?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of the president. I don't have any news to make on when he'll speak or what he'll say. He'll address it in time. But it is a fact now, an uncomfortable fact for all of us in America, that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. And the reason it's important to the campaign is this: to be the president of the United States, wisdom, character, and judgment are really important. And if you weigh that against Donald Trump's life, in his personal life, in his business life, in his political life, everything that he touches has turned to dirt. He has used the power of the presidency to hurt people, not to help people. Joe Biden, on the other hand, wakes up every day making sure that we're creating jobs, that we have low unemployment rate, that we're putting people back to work, thinking about restoring democracy to people. But democracy is on the ballot. Make no mistake about it. And the fact that Donald Trump and all of his acolytes are now going to attack the rule of law, they are attacking the very foundation of what makes America great. So if everybody wants to stop that, you got to go to the polls. Sign up at joebiden.com. Come work with us, save democracy, and make America a better place for everybody. That's what Joe Biden wants to do.
As you just suggested, the former president and a number of Republicans, including just a short time ago, the Speaker of the House, members of the Senate, have said that, have compared to what happened yesterday to what would happen in a communist nation, saying that the American justice system failed here. Let's get your reaction to that. Do you have concerns as to how the former president and these Republicans may incite his supporters after what happened?
Well, I think that we're at a very delicate moment. Joe Biden has talked to this 7 times. He's given a speech about how fragile democracy can be, but yet how strong it can be if people just show up and vote. There is a very strong and clear antidote to anything that the speaker might be saying or the president, the ex-president might be saying, all of which are wrong, by the way. You have to go to the polls and vote. That's how, in a democracy, you stop autocracies from happening. So go to joebiden.com. That is the only way to keep him out of the Oval Office. And there's nothing that happened yesterday that's going to relieve that burden or take that responsibility away from the American people. But to be clear, Speaker Johnson always says, he's from Louisiana, he's actually no Mike and I like him, that he's a constitutional lawyer. The Constitution of the United States says that we are a nation of laws, not of men. It allows for trial by jury, which is one of the most sacrosanct things in a democracy. It also calls for the peaceful transition of power. And as a result of yesterday, we now know that Donald Trump tried to stop the election from being held in a free and fair way. And then after it was held, he tried to stop the peaceful transition of power. You can't have 2 more graver assaults on democracy, and democracy cannot have a greater defender than Joe Biden. So this choice is really, really clear. You can have somebody that cares about himself, his billionaire friends, and seeks retribution and hate and wants to destroy this country, or you can pick somebody that wakes up every day fighting for the American people, who is going to save democracy if the American people give him a chance.
National co-chair for President Joe Biden's re-election campaign, Mitch Landrieu, thank you so much for joining us this morning.